Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat to some of the leading lights and interesting figures in this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing, or sometimes traditional publishing, which is kind of where we are with today's guest. We are hugely excited to have Alana Albertson with us, who has straddled both things, traditional publishing and indie publishing, and she's got something really exciting to talk about. So we are delighted to have you, Alana. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Hidden Gems was a huge part of my indie success. So
we always like to hear that. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Roland. I'm really excited to have Alana on. This is something that we've been trying to do for a while because, as she said, we've been working with Alana for a long time, and she's had this big deal in the works and hasn't been able to sort of talk about everything. She still can't talk about absolutely everything, but she can talk about a lot. And so, basically, she's got what the dream is for a lot of authors, where she's sold the rights to one of her books to get developed into a series. So let's talk about that. First of all, hi, Alana. Great to meet you. Finally.
Finally, I know.
Yeah. And that, so tell us how this all went down. You generally were indie, of course. But for this particular book, you went trad. So let's talk first of like why you did that, and then how that sort of led to this big deal that you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always indie, and I loved it. And I was, making a lot of money and super successful as an indie author with 29 books out. And but I always had an agent. I had an agent first, and initially, way back in 2008, I had tried to sell a chick lit book. It was awful. Don't try to find it. It's maybe they're out there, but anyway, and we didn't sell it. And then I rewrote that book as a romance, and that became my first indie book. Also didn't sell, or another indie book didn't sell. And then finally I figured out what I was doing, and I started having success. However, I never, my agent was always there, and she would always say, "Oh, send me a book." But I was finding incredible success indie, and so to me, it made absolutely no sense to do it. But throughout the indie grind, I mean, so like one of my books, Badass, hit number 3 in all the Amazon charts, so that was amazing, and had a bunch of books in the top 100. And so I was doing really well, and I never felt tempted to go trad. But I started getting very interested in, what you said, the author fantasy. I really wanted, the fantasy of getting a movie made or a TV made, right? So I had one indie series called 7 Deadly Seals that did incredibly well. And I wrote it as a serial. So I didn't write it as a book. I released it in little novellas, and then I would box them. And it sold so well, I had a print-only deal for it. And then I had been accepted to a master's in TV writing class at Hedgebrook, which is the most incredible program for any women listening or watching. It's an all women's writing retreat in Washington. They call it a retreat. I call it a rehab. You have no internet, make your own fire. Like, it's very dramatic. And you're like, you don't realize how addicted you are. Like, you're sitting there like in a cabin, and like you have nothing. You like call your family once a day. It's like very, very crazy. But in it, the showrunner of Homeland, which was my favorite show, edited my pilot for 7 Deadly Seals. Meredith Stein. And so I had this pilot for this book. And for context for this book was the number 2 on Radish Fiction, which is a fiction app, for 2.5 years. I have like millions of sales on it. And I could not get it looked at by a TV producer, even though I had it edited by this Emmy Award winning TV showrunner. And so like I kept trying to get a film agent. And again, this was indie. But I did have a traditional print release, and it was sold well. And I couldn't get it looked at all. And so and this was really successful book for me, and as successful as I think it could have been indie. And it was just devastating for me, because I couldn't even get it to the point where someone would say, "No, I'm not going to read it." I mean, no, it sucks. Like, tell me it sucks, but just like read it. So I thought, maybe I should go trad, and my agent every year would check in and say, hey, do you want to send me a book? And I would say no. And I would just publish. And so anyway, I saw Crazy Rich Asians, and I saw it, I read it later, but I saw the movie, and I had this kind of like I was like crying in the theater. Everyone was like, what is wrong with it? I was like, had this visual reaction because it was a romance and it was amazing, and this all Asian cast, and it really like affected me. And I went home that night and I texted my agent and I said, I'm writing you, I'm Mexican, I'm half Mexican. Well, I consider myself Mexican. My mom's Mexican. And I said, I'm writing Crazy Rich Mexicans. Like, I'm writing about Mexican joy, and like, it's not going to be like a trauma porn is, like, it's not going to be a story about, immigration, or, it's going to be this fun, festive story. Right. And so I told her that. And of course I still didn't write it because I had all these deadlines. I think I had arcs booked with you, like I just like, so I didn't do it, but I had this idea for the story. So, anyway, then the pandemic hit and I had a little extra time. And, so I just sat down one night, and once you have written as many books as I have, you don't have to write the book to sell traditional. You only have to write it on spec. So I only had to write 50 pages. And so I write really fast. So I sat down one night, wrote 50 pages of the book, called Ramon and Julieta, and sent it to my agent. And like by the next day we had multiple offers. So we had like 4 offers. And one of them was Montlake. And so as an indie author, you're like, Montlake. And then I got on the call and they said, we'll promote your backlist. And I was like, I'm going to die. Like, that's just everything you want to hear. But ultimately we went with Berkeley, because I felt like I'd already done everything that Montlake had done. Like, what I was doing this for was to actually get the traditional publishing deal. And as an indie author, this is completely humbling because you have no control. You can't pick anything, and like, I'm like, we can write a prequel and we can make it free and then we can do it. And they're like, no. I'm just like, wait, what? Like, let's do the art, like everything that I can do. Like, I knew how to control how my release I wasn't allowed to do. But anyway, so once back to the TV. So once the Publishers Weekly blurb was printed in, there's a thing called Publishers Weekly where it's like the list of the trad deals. And I recommend, there's a free version anyone can subscribe to. Then the paid version is obviously better, but it lists every single solitary deal. And so my blurb was printed and so I think the deal was in June, and then in July the deal was sent to this email. On that day, my agent got 9 emails from random producers wanting to read the book to see a fit for film. So I'm like, I haven't written the book. I sold it on spec. I wrote 50 pages, right? And I can write, but all of a sudden I'm like, all these producers are writing me, and this is what I wanted. This is why I went trad, but I haven't written the book. So all of a sudden I like can't write, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot how to write, because now this is like my dream. And so I'm start stressing. So I have to write the book. And so I finally finished the book, and my literary agent sends it to all of these producers. Of those 9 producers, 3 of them at that point made offers. And that's in October of 2020. And so the first one, I just didn't really vibe with him. I just didn't really see he had a vision. I was asking specific questions. You have calls with them. The second one I loved. He had a big star attached who I loved, who I could see as the lead. He had a vision of where to go with it. So I'm like, hey, let's done. Like, egg in the basket. Let's go. Right. And then the third one was a film agent from William Morris. And so I'm thinking like, why am I going to get rid of a deal that I actually think that I have, that I can finally do it for? Like, this maybe the film agent who was amazing, but she was talking about these people she was going to send it to and everything. And, but ultimately I went with the film agent. And I can stop for questions real quick, and then we can go to the next part. So yeah. So then at that point I signed with a film agent. So I still had my literary agent, but the film agent from William Morris was going to film agent with her to get me more offers, and that'll take me to the next part, but I'll stop for a second.
So sorry, so it was like number 2 and number 3 sort of got together and became what you signed with, is that? what I understood?
No. So
Oh.
yeah, offer number one didn't go. Offer number two, I loved, and I really wanted to go with him, and I really liked him. But offer three was a film agent for William Morris, and they do packaging deals, which I'm going to talk about more. So I said no to number two, and
Okay.
and I was convinced this was the biggest mistake of my life, because at least this was a deal. At least I was going to be optioned. I was going to whatever. And three was I just have a film agent. Well, I already had a lit agent, right? So I thought maybe no one want it. And the film agent was then going to send it to other people later. This is October. So she didn't actually send it till February. So I was like just in agony. So I said no to one, no to two. And I signed with the film agent from William Morris. So now I have a film agent from William Morris and my literary agent.
Okay. So yeah, that is a whirlwind. So
no, it was crazy.
Yeah. And I think, you and I were sort of talking throughout this whole process, and I have no idea how long it all takes. I remember you telling me about it. I'm like, let's talk about this. And you're like, oh yeah, I can't yet. And then it was like, oh, still can't, because, and then you're telling me about the process. It's a long drawn out thing. Right.
I think that's one of the hardest things is especially when you're indie, you're used to doing stuff, and just like, people, to this day, when's your TV show going to be on? I'm like, I don't know. Like at some point I'll know. And everyone, my new PR agent, and she reps a bunch of people who have TV shows, and it's like all of a sudden they call you and you're like, oh, your show's up. You're like, what? Like, so it's just a fully different thing. And especially coming as an indie author where you have control with everything, you have zero control in this. And it's incredibly hard because these are your imaginary friends. These are your people, so.
So just sort of for some of the technical details so that people understand, like if you had gone with number two, that was a actual sort of like a deal to get it done. And so that wasn't a film agent. So just so that we know, you have this literary agent, and everyone knows you've got to pay your agents a certain
15.
percentage, right? And 15. Now you have a film agent, so you've got to pay them as well, right?
Right, but they split it. So they would split. So they each take 7.5%.
Okay, so it's not another 15.
No,
it's like
so she partners with her for my deals. So it takes no more money out of me, but the potential. And the other thing, which was interesting, one of the things I wanted to talk about it is I was at this round table at this amazing author conference, and they were talking about all these other offers who had options, and they were all saying, oh, your options are really, really, really low monetarily wise. And that was not my experience at all. So lucky. And so I think that was the difference, the film agents. And so they were talking about, and these were huge authors, like bigger than me and whatever. And they were saying their options were like 1,000 or whatever. And I think the film agent is really, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but it was really what kind of boosted mine to the next level. So.
Right. Yeah. Because it probably, if your literary agent had, I guess, made the deal with number two, maybe she's not as well versed in that sort of negotiation. So you maybe wouldn't have got as much money then as if you have that film agent who knows how to negotiate those bigger deals, I guess, right?
Well, I think it's more in terms of competition, because so had I taken number two, I still would have had the offer from number one. So I would have just had two people, and I would have picked who'd go, and they could just say, hey, and I mean, as an author, you're so desperate to get it made into film and TV. I would have been like, $5, like here, So that's one of the things I'll talk about in a second. When they started getting the bidding war, I was like, let's just like give it, because it's just nuts, and you don't want to, you just want it done, and you don't want to feel like you're losing it. It's kind of like the lottery, so it's kind of like a psychological game, but any author who thinks about this, Hollywood's just a full different thing. It's like so weird.
I totally understand. Like, I would be the same way. It was just like, okay, just take the deal, and then
whatever, I'll pay you. Like, just get it made.
Because then, once you've done it on the second deal, that's when you're going to get the big money anyway.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, then I can set thing in my little office. Right now, I just want something. And like, I had a nervous breakdown between, not an actual one, but like, I was between between October and February, because I was like, I didn't sign this deal, which had the star that I loved attached to it, who I could totally see in it. And I loved the producer. I loved everything. Like, he was an author too. And I'd read one of his, like, it was just like a fabulous conversation. And then I was like, I just gave this up for nothing. And then I was waiting for the film agent. And so it was hard.
But that person can still come back in February in the bidding war if they were still interested, I guess. I mean, they might have moved on, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other, okay, so the book is out now, right?
Yeah, finally. Like, it's so weird with indie because like I wrote it 2 years ago and it's finally out. And so like the second book I also wrote 2 years ago and it's not out yet. And it literally just kills me because it goes against my, finish the book, press up, like it's so tough for me to have all these books written that aren't out. So
okay, so now there's the question of so you have that book out now. When did it come out?
February of this year, so 2020. So I mean
2022.
Yeah.
So how it's been a few months. How does it compare sales wise with your indies?
So this is the weirdest thing for me. So I had this super delusional fantasy that it would like, bump up on my backlist sales and everything like that. So number one, so sales are incredible, but they're 97% print. And as an indie girl, I'm all about my data. I was 97% ebook, right? 3% print. And so I like would mark, I have charts. I know exactly what I made and whatever. So the only uptick I've seen has been in my print. So now my prints, my indie prints are selling. The funniest thing to me is, I'll get these for you, is like, I love this debut book from this author. I hope she writes something else. I'm like, I got 29 other books. Like, go on Amazon. Like Amazon today, I was listed one of their 8 authors, on KDP. And it's like a listing all these other books. So there isn't a crossover. And so trad, and my PR team. So, I've learned so much, but like, I'm in, airports and I'm in bookstores, and it's kind of like this different audience versus the people who, I was in KU. I was also wide. I did a lot of stuff. I was in Radish, but, no one's buying my $9.99 ebook, and I don't think you should. Don't buy a $9.99. But like, so if anything, they buy the print, right? Because the print's $12.99. So that's why a lot of indie authors, and I used to say, oh, they're so stupid, they should price it lower. They purposely price it high so you buy the print, because no one's buying $9.99 week, buy the print for a couple of dollars more. So it's just a totally different demographic. So sales have been incredible. I think I've sold over 10,000 copies, which I think is great. And that's 97% print.
That's amazing. It's so interesting to when you look at that, because that's the Achilles heel of the indie author is actually getting print sales.
Right. Yeah. And so now it's totally changed how I think of my backlist and what I plan. I still consider myself, I don't think I've gone fully, I'm trad, but I plan to be hybrid again. But there's contracts and there's rules. But what's so interesting is like I've done literary festivals that I wasn't, and I don't mean so indie authors who do author signings. That's different. I've spoken at the Tucson Literary Festival, which I loved, Las Vegas, San Diego. So like I go to these events, I speak on panels, like I do this stuff, and then I sell books there. So I'm doing a lot of also bookstores that never. So one of my books about us was number 3 in the entire Amazon store. I'd sold so many copies of that one, and I couldn't get it in bookstores. Like I would go and be like, hey, can you list this? Here's the sales history. They're like, no. And so I'm in, bookstores, all the bookstores, like I do signings every weekend in bookstores. And so, I sign them and I bring my indie books. I'm like, hey, can I, I wrote other books too. So that's the difference.
Yeah. And it's weird to me because you'd think that the overhead of a paperback is higher.
Right.
Like they've got to print it, they've got to ship it, they've got to, stock it. You'd think that they'd want to sell more ebooks, even at a cheaper price. And $9.99 versus, I'm looking now, it's like $13.38 paperback is what it's listed, right? So it's like they could go lower, and I'm sure still make more profit, right? And I think they just, I don't know. It's like they're pushing against the ebook industry, even for their own sales, right? Because they just don't want it to succeed. They're still stuck in, No,
but like the biggest thing was for me was like, so I wrote this prologue. So I'm like just so indie that I wrote a prologue of the parents, right? And I wrote their full little ebook, right? Like, and I was like, okay, because it's kind of so it's a Romeo and Juliet thing, but their parents knew each other. before. So I wrote their little story, right? And I'm like, let's release this as an ebook, right? Like, and this is it. And I'm like, let's, do arcs on it. Like, let's get it free on BookBub and let's like lead. And they were like, no. And I was like, why? Like, I guarantee, like, if this works, like, and I gave them data from huge authors who've done it, who were like, Mary Force did this, like other, and they were like, no. And I was just like, but like, I can't. And so it's very hard to go, indie to trad, because you're always thinking, I'm like, oh, so for the cover reveal, we're doing this, and it's like, no.
So what's your deal though with them? Is it like you can't write anything in that same sort of world or that same sort of series unless it's with them? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so they have the rights to my next romance book, and so they have been great, and I have the most incredible agents. One of the things was I was like, I am going to still publish indie. And so I was allowed to publish a certain amount of books that I'd already had pre-order before this book came out, but it's no book 3 months before and 3 months after. The problem was I was so swamped with this and with the TV stuff, I didn't have time to do it, because my indie process was write a horrible first draft, send it to my editors. Had great editors. So I don't anyone want to think that my indie editors were not good. They were incredible, but they would do one round of edits, possibly two. So they would fix my book, which was a nightmare. And then I would, fix my book, and then I'd send it to copy editing and I'd publish it. That is not how it is with trad. My editor is a very intensive editor. It's really a partnership. We've done like 4 rounds of developmental edits. So because of that, I haven't had the time to release indie. So like I write the book, I send it to her, she sends it back to me. I rewrite the entire book, I send it to her, she sent. So it's just like more labor intensive. And then the other thing is I cannot publish unless I've met all my deadlines, which obviously I need to meet my deadlines, and I have, but like, my 3rd book is due in March. So it's like, I'm not allowed to publish because that book's not in. So it's like, it's kind of like a Jenga set. And so technically once they're all in, yes, I can publish, but then I'm in my 3-month before or after period. So, but I've written books, so it's funny. And then I think my fans don't get it. They're like, you've lied to us. You don't release your books. I have like 20 books on my computer. So like there might be this day and I'll be calling them like, hey, can I have 20 arc dates? But like I might have a window of a week. So like, they'll be like, what's wrong with this author? She released like 20 books in 5 days. That might be the only time I can release the books, right? So people are going to be like, she's not, but like, you have these windows, and that's when you're allowed to do stuff. So it's very weird.
So you're not locked in terms of like the story. Like you could actually, during that time, you could publish a prequel to this book if you want.
Not at all. No. They own this, and especially now that I have the TV deal and the streamer deal, no, I can't do anything with this. These people they own this completely, and they own anything slightly similar. I will say my indie books are way more tropey, like classic romance, like Navy SEAL, Princess, like just very like this. And this book really is kind of like, it's just more of a kind of like cultural, like book that's just kind of like, it's also randomly 3rd person. I don't know why all my indie books are first. I started writing this one in 3rd. I don't know, maybe it helps me detach from that, but it's just a very different book. It's still a romance, but it's a very different book.
Right. And then okay, so now if like you don't have to give specific numbers, but you track all this stuff, so I'm sure you're aware. And the fact that you want to go back to indie sort of probably answers this, but like I was saying before, with the sales of this one versus your others, I get that it's a shift of more paperbacks. But are you selling more or less copies of this in the same sort of time period of sort of your other books? And B, are you making more or less money?
Okay, great question. And people ask this all the time. So my deal was huge. So I made great money, especially with the TV deal. And
excluding the TV deal. I mean, just on book sales.
Yes. So it was yes and no. You're paid in advance. I got a 6-figure advance. And so, but it's trad. So they split it, right? So you get like, a quarter of it when you sign, a quarter of it when you not turn it in, but when they accept it, which is weird. So I write so that means they've accepted it for edits. And then you get a quarter of it when it releases and a quarter of it a year after it releases, and then a quarter of it when you start the second book, and then a quarter of it when they accept the second book, and then a quarter of it when you start the third. So it's like this huge thing. So money wise, it's doable, but it's not. A couple things. I thought the amount would be not more than indie, but comparable. Because initially we had the dates released as February 22, November 22, June 23, and they've pushed the book back because of printing delays, product issues, that kind of stuff. So now my book, the first one, February 22nd, the second book is now June 2023. Now that was supposed to come out in November, right? And so I don't even have the date for my third book. So now that they've stretched my deal, I believe I'm going to make less than it, because indie, I knew exactly what I was going to make, because I would release 4 books a year, and then I would do my backlist, and I would have this thing. So yeah, so I believe I'm making, it's the same amount, but they've stretched it, and you have no control over the dates, and so that's horrible.
So in terms of the raw number of sales, what are we looking at there? Is it less for that same sort of time period as other books? Like how many copies?
Well, I mean, I have had some really, really big sellers. So I've sold like 10,000 sales of this, and it's 97% print. So for a book, it's so different though, because depending on the other books, whether it was in KU or with Radish and bonuses, so it's like hard to quantify that. I had books that definitely made this amount of money alone or more, but then I would have total flops, so like it kind of averaged out, so it's comparable, but you have more freedom indie. So how to explain this? Let's say I had a bad flop, like of an indie book, so like I have one really good, one bad. I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly, okay, well, I'm going to do this in my best-selling series. I'll write a prequel. I knew how to do it, and I knew how to get that number up, and I knew how to make sure that my income maintained a certain level, or I'd pulse it in and out of KU, or I'd get a book club or whatever. And I don't have any of that control anymore. And so you just have less control. Like you just, you're waiting for them to give you a date to release it, and that's when you get paid. The money is great though, Trad. It's just stretched, and you can't control it, and you can't do things to supplement your income.
Right. So, but the 10,000 units that you've moved is sort of comparable to other books, just before it was more ebooks. On average, right? There's been some big successes.
On average. Yeah. I have some huge bestsellers.
Yeah. So. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the story then. So where we left off, so it's
October, and I'm having a panic attack, and it's ready. And so they're like, well, we don't want to send it out to sale until the election's over, right? So like we're waiting for the election. They're like, okay, well, we're gonna send it right after the election. So I'm like, cool. And they're like, actually, we don't want to send it until after Christmas. So I'm like, just can't even handle it anymore, because I'm like, I gave up my deal. I'm never gonna have one. I'm like, whatever. So it's January. They're like, oh, we're gonna send it out soon. It's like February. So in February, my film agent sends me this list, which is literally like the whole who's of Hollywood. Like I'm like fangirling, like can't even believe it, of like these 30 huge names, and I'm just like, this is a joke, right? This is like, you're punking me, right? Of people that I send it to. And I'm like, this is like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, this is ridiculous. I should have taken the one deal. None of these people are going to read my book or whatever. So then she sends it to them. And like, all I do, she's like, are these names okay with you? I'm like, yeah, like, and so from that list, and like, I'm just dying, because I'm just like, I can't even, believe it. And then from this list, I get 5 offers, and they're incredible. And then the minute they realize they're in some type of bidding war situation, one of the offers drops, and then I have 4 offers. 2 of the offers are film. One, the huge head of a huge studio, and I love him. And then the other one, my favorite actress, who I literally had written it for. And then one of the TV, my other favorite actress, who I was just obsessed with. And then the other TV was like the guy who did like 2 of the hugest franchises ever. And so I'm just like, okay, so they're like, now you're going to have these phone calls with these people, and you're not allowed to fangirl. Like, they're supposed to be impressing you. And so I was so mad, because it was during the pandemic. Had this not been the pandemic, like, I think I would have gone there, and I, then had lunch and things like that. So I'm like on Zoom with these people, and I'm just like, I like can't handle, like, I'm just like, like scream, and I'm like, so they're supposed to be like interviewing with me, and so they're talking to me about their visions of the book and everything, and like, I mean, it's just nuts. Like it's nuts. So they have all their calls with me. And so it's like they're back to back these calls, and then I talk to the film agent. It's like this huge thing, and then they all make their offers, and all of their offers were like amazing. And then my film agent's like, okay, well now we're gonna counter, right? So she counters with this like obscene number, and I'm just like, what are you doing? You know, just like take like I would like, and just ridiculous like things in it, and so then we're waiting for the counters, and then we get them. And then I can't decide because, you know, it came down to me for the TV person who like I just adored. And then the film guy who I loved and I felt like had the vision and like had done some of my favorite movies. And, you know, he was like, oh, I'm going to spend so much money on your opening scene. I mean, just like ridiculous stuff, you know, and I had written it as a movie. I had written it in a really 3-act structure. I'd seen it as a movie again. It was from like Crazy Rich Asians that I wanted something like that. And, but the TV people really convinced, they go like, Bridgerton had just come out and they were like, look at the fandom and look what it does. And this is where it's at. And, you know, we don't, at the TV theaters were, or the movie theaters were shut at this point. And they were like, you don't want the movie on streaming because like, it'll happen in the end. You're going to get some residual, but nothing like Bridgerton. And, I was like, I hadn't written it as a TV show, but I'd taken that TV writing class and whatever. So I go with the TV people who I just love, but it was the hardest decision. So I signed with them, and I'm like so excited, and they're amazing. And they immediately like involve me in everything. And they're like, hey, you know, we're going to find the dream showrunner. So they give me a list of like these just incredible names. And, we got the number 1 person on her list, which we couldn't even believe we got her because she's just huge and she's just so incredible. And so then we got our showrunner signed on, and then her contract took forever. So I'm like sitting there waiting, and waiting is like August or whatever. And so then I have a call with her, and she's amazing and she totally gets everything. And then they tell me once she's locked on or whatever, that they're going to go to the streamers. I'm going to start presenting it to all the streamers. So then they have meetings with all the streamers, like all the names. And I'm just like looking at my email and whatever. And then I get an email saying that, you know, the best streamer wants it. And then we wait and we wait and we wait. And 2 months later, we finally get the email saying they committed to it. And then now, and then they pay me for the option, and then they extended the option, which is what they did. And that was in September. And now we're just waiting to go into development. And that should be sometime. I don't know. So I'm like, it's just like nuts. So that's where we're at.
That's awesome. So you ended up getting this, how many episodes is it? So you got the series deal with a streamer who is unnamed, but in your opinion, the best one. So you have a number, and I think in a lot of ways that's great because, you know, a lot of times I see a movie based on a book. I've read the book already. I mean, they have to cut so much, right? Because fitting it into a 2-hour movie or less. Whereas if you have a streaming deal, you can really fit in far more of the book, I would think, than if you had to cut it down 2 hours. Like, I mean, if each episode is an hour or 45 minutes or whatever, and you have 5 or 6 episodes. So how many episodes do you have? And are you the one writing the like all the episodes, or did they hire somebody to do that?
Yeah, great, amazing question. So, so luckily, yeah, absolutely, and that's why. So book 1 is season 1, book 2 is season 2. So it's like a Bridgerton. Book 3 is season 3. I'm only under a contract for 3 books, and you know, so hopefully I'll have a contract for 4, 5, and 6, which will be season 4, 5, and 6. So I am an executive producer. I think that's the name only. I don't have a clue like what that means. Like, I don't know. I'm like, hey, and I have the option of possibly being in the writer's room, which is my fantasy. And I'm hoping, so again, that hasn't been finalized, but that's my dream. I have heard, not from my people, because they're incredible, but other authors who have had shows on the streamer that, like, you know, with the TV show, no one wants the author in the room, right? We're like, actually, Ramon wouldn't say that. I know that because I just asked him because I am him, right? Like, no one wants us there, right? Because these are our imaginary friends. Like, we're the worst nightmare. But I promise to behave and, you know, just sit there and like smile and only speak when spoken to. So I'm hoping to be in the writer's room, and I've been told that that's a possibility. That I did not have any part in the pilot, but I've also been told my pilot is my exact book, and it ends at they followed it like very, very close. So I'm super thrilled about that. So a number of episodes, I think we said 8 to 10, and again, that'll be finalized by the network. And yeah, so book 1, season 1, book 2, season 2, book 3, season 3 onward.
So
I mean, that
so
must be really difficult to like have to watch your baby being picked apart by other writers.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to be in the room when they're like, oh, actually, like, whatever, and you're like, and again, that hasn't happened to me yet. The showrunner, loves the source material, and luckily her pilot, stuck to it. But I think one of the things I learned in the TV writing class I took up at Hedgebrook, is that I feel like you just kind of have to divorce yourself from the project. Like I don't feel like I know anything about TV writing. I feel like I'm a novelist, right? And so it's like, it's fine for me to be like, hey, this is your stuff, and just to try to, tune it out, because obviously you want the best representation of your stuff, but these people know what they're doing. It's a fully different industry, and I don't, and it's kind of exciting to see like all the different things that they're going to come up with. So I'm just totally humbled for that experience. And some writers who have had this, who's also like Tom Perrotta, who wrote Election and Little Children, they had a similar thing. So he was like, they did the adaptation or whatever, and then eventually he was in the writer's room of one of his shows, and then they eventually gave him a show. He was a showrunner of Leftovers. So that's a career trajectory that I would be completely open to. However, I'd also be happy just being a novelist, depending on how it goes. So I'm just like open to all the possibilities. The writer's room that I did at Hedgebrook, and again, it was like a mock, but she conducted it like a real writer's room. Like, it's intense. Like, she, the showrunner who taught that class, again, she did Homeland, but like they're asking you questions, and it's like, it's just like this, such a cool vibe. And if you think, as an author, we're just like alone in a room writing, right? Like, it's this, I've got my coffee, and like I've got this like thing. And so to kind of sit there, have all these people give you feedback, like edits at an early stage, I think it'll be a really cool, humbling experience. So I'm hoping that I get that opportunity. So
yeah, I think that'd be great. I think it's one thing though to if they're pitching different ideas about how to can do a scene or whatever, whereas if they were like, I don't like this character, if you have to hear that kind of thing, and it's like
what?
Yeah,
you don't like
yeah,
me?
that might be harder, right? So do you have any sort of like say or veto power? Like if something comes in and you don't like it and you're like, no, that's terrible, like, will you be able to do anything? I mean, obviously you can give your opinion, but they can also ignore it. So like, do you have any sort of power?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. Yeah. And so it was in my contract, so yeah, I do have power. I don't really plan to exercise it though. I really am kind of in the zen state that this is just like, I feel like this is like winning the lottery, and so I'm just like happy to let it. I mean, there are a few hills I'll die on, but I have complete and total utter faith. I mean, my showrunner is just like, yeah, she has like the top shows on the top streamer, and two of them, and I'm just so in awe of her work, and so I feel like she just fully gets it. So yeah, I'm
so and the streamer is the one that optioned for or at least the deal was that for 3 books, you said, right?
Well, so no, so I mean, it's a possible. So they have the option for the first one. They've extended the option for the second one. They have the option to option that, and that is the thing, and that's the plan of the 3 to possible 6. But none of that happens until they decide and whatever. But it's again, it's like a Bridgerton thing. But yeah, So
after each season, they determine whether or not there is enough viewership to go forward, and then at that point, they have the option to go forward. And
right, no one else. I can't sell to anyone else until it runs out. Like, yeah, and so they had to re-option this because they had 18 months, and so when the re-option, you get paid again. So that's like you're like hoping they don't meet the deadline.
right.
You're like I'm like, oh my gosh, do not turn in that script. Like, don't answer your emails, right? So because you want to get paid again, because if they can't get it done in those 18 months. And I did like reserve certain rights. Like, I have to get my EGOT. No, I'm not. I have a fantasy of turning it into a Broadway musical. And so like I'm trying to reserve stuff for different things.
Awesome. And then, okay, so they option the first one, they re-option, and just so people understand what that means, they basically are paying you for the right to do something with it at some point, but they don't know yet, but you can't give it to anyone else. And then when it expires, so they could, but they re-option it, so they pay you again for another 18 months or whatever.
Exactly.
So what they've done with book 2 and 3, then, if I understand, is they've just basically haven't optioned it, but they said that we have the right to be the first ones to option it.
Right. And that no one else can option it because they have the character. So it's like, so they have it, but they don't have it.
So they don't have to pay you for that.
No, they
until
don't.
They opt. Okay.
Yeah. And I haven't about to send them book 2. So yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's pretty rare that you would see a series come on one streamer and then not do well and then go to another streamer. I mean, I guess it happens, but very rarely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that is like super, super exciting. So, do you have, so you said, I think you said that you had somebody really big is attached to it as well, right?
Huge. Yeah. She's massive.
Yeah.
Definitely like the biggest, actress.
And that's for the lead.
And she's directing it. And so she's 100% directing it and she's producing it, but I don't know if she's producing it the way I'm producing it or if she's but she's producing it also. And then she may or may not star in it. I would love for her to star in it. And again, we're working, all that will be finalized later. She's 100% directing it. And she also has an incredibly good relationship with the streamers. So
do you have any say in the casting? Like, are you allowed to like veto? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So, and then like, do you think I would be good for a lead role since you're
absolutely? We can all come in. And
we'll fly us down to the writers' room.
It's so funny. Yeah. People always say, oh, do you want to be in it? Like I have zero desire to be in it. I don't know why. Like yes, I would love to be in the writers' room, but I have like I don't know. I've never wanted to be on camera. Like it's just not my thing. Total writer, like whatever. But yeah, and the best thing that I'm excited because it's a San Diego book, so it'll be filmed at in San Diego, and so like that's just so exciting for me. So it's I mean the team's incredible. Producers are just so awesome. So I just can't even believe it.
So you wouldn't even want to do a walk-on Stan Lee kind of role where you're just like come in.
I mean, I probably will, but I like don't really want to. I don't know. Maybe I'll put my dog in it or something. I don't know. I just it's kind of weird. I mean, and I know like Stephanie Meyer did, but I don't know. It's just not. I would much rather write it. So
yeah, no, that's amazing.
I think one of the things I love about this is your concept. It seems really strong. It's like I love Crazy Rich Asians. I found that like such an interesting movie to watch because it's like a whole different world, except it's familiar and the characters are ones that resonate with me. And I'm already stoked about this as a show because it's like Crazy Rich Mexicans. It's, as you said, it's really exciting to have something about Mexican culture that isn't about being smuggled by coyotes across the border or how tough it is here or whatever. It's like it's exciting and positive and fresh.
Yeah, I teach a class for authors called Breakout Book, and one of the things I talk about is like doing something new or familiar but fresh. I mean, I'm never telling people to plagiarize or copy or anything like that, but to me, watching Crazy Rich Asians was like a religious experiment. It was just so joyous and beautiful and everything. And yes, so the culture is not mine, but it's so relatable. And then I was thinking like, so like a lot of the Mexican, and so when I was looking at Mexican depictions of stuff in Hollywood, with the exception of Selena, which is this complete tragedy, and she's almost a Madonna culture like figure in our culture. We have it's like the drug dealers, what I mean, and like the full controversy with American Dirt, which don't get me started on. That's a full other podcast we could talk about. But it was like I wanted to see like because I in La Jolla, so where I have the book, which is in San Diego, like I was like, have you ever gone to La Jolla? Like it's called Crazy Rich Mexicans, like like the lifestyles. And so I made it in this accessible, and that's what Hollywood wants. And so Hollywood wants something that they understand, but with a fresh take. And so we were kind of sick in the Latina industry. It's like what we say, like all of our depictions are trauma porn, right? So maids, drug dealers, whatever. And not that that's not part of our culture. And I have family members, you know, who, you know, but like I wanted to show this joyous celebration, and mine's really a celebration of like the mindset around Day of the Dead. And so, you know, but it's a joyous occasion. And so they're remembering their loved ones, and it's dancing and food and music and everything like that. So it's what I really wanted it to be. And I wanted that feeling. And this is nothing like my indie books. My indie books were very tropey, you know, and so, which they were great, but they were totally different. So yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about, or any idea about when it would be done? Like, I mean, they've written the pilot, you said, right? And I don't even know how it works. Do they write all the episodes before they start filming, or they just go?
No, so basically the pilot will get, the pilot will be approved. And so that's what, you know, you're waiting for. And then you go into development. The minute you go into development, they set the writer's room, which hopefully I'll be in. But if not, that's fine. And then they cast the writer's room, which this one's very exciting because there are not that many Latina shows. And so that's one of the reasons we think that we were successful. So like there are currently no Latina shows on any I mean, everything has been canceled. So you know, to have this writer's room. So then they set the writer's room, then they do the casting, and then we start filming, and then I'll have dates and stuff like that. I mean, I had initially thought, and again, this stuff, and you and I have been talking about this, you know, forever, but in 20, I thought it would be out by now. So clearly that's not happening. I thought it'd be out next year. I don't think that's happening. I'm hoping, you know, 23, you know, I'm just praying they'll announce it so I can start, you know, specifically saying things. And I really want that tie-in cover with like the actors and the sticker, like seen on stream, you know what I mean? That's all I want. Like because it's, to me, I'm you know, thinking of ways to market it. So that's, you know, what I want. And I want to be able to talk, you know, freely, and then, you know, get pictures of the actors holding my book and like all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah.
Are you responsible for doing a lot of the marketing, or is the trad publisher taking any of that on?
No, so that's the most interesting thing of this all was, yeah, I mean, I had to fight tooth and nail to get your arcs. Like I had to go through like 4 meetings to do it because, you know, they were like, oh, well, we only do Netflix or NetGalley. And I'm like, this works. This is how, like, they were like, oh, we want to sell your book, not get more with it. Like, this is not giving the books away. This is like, it was like this huge thing, you know? So no, so I have an in-house publicity and marketing team. And then I also have a private PR agents also. So it's totally different. Like it's completely different. And I have no control over anything. And
that must be very frustrating.
It's so awful for me. I mean, they're wonderful. I love my team and they're all incredible. But just to come from, like, we're trying to do the cover reveal for the second book. And I'm like, okay, we'd like this and that. Like, and it's, you just, and I know like what works. Like, I know, I'm like, well, let's see this. And they're like, oh, well, this is how we do it. Right. And so it's tough. It's tough to come. I think it would be, and it's my friends who are just trads who are in this like Discord group of other Berkeley authors. And so it's like, you know, they just kind of, oh, you know, we do this, or should we have a newsletter? I'm like, yes, like get a newsletter. Like I can't, you know what I mean? And, you know, so it's just such a different experience for me. You know, but they've been amazing. Like the first draft of the cover I despised, and I was like, I'm not releasing the book. Like I will just cancel the deal and the option. Like I don't even care. But you know, they came to bat for me, and we got a new cover designer. So like there's certain things I will total diva out for and be like, I just refuse. Like, you know, and but my editor's been incredible. My agent always has my back. Everyone's amazing, but I have no control. And so I mean, they listen to me. It's not like they shut me down, but they, you know, it's a different market. So I let them do their job.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposedly the experts, right? So
right.
you gotta at least go through the process once to see if it works their way before you can really, you know. Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, well, listen, I know we're coming up to the end here, but I think once the deal is like announced and you can talk about who the streamer is and maybe some of the people that are attached and all that stuff, we'll definitely have you back on. But I think, you know, in the future too, if you do get into the writer's room, I think that would be a fascinating thing to talk about. Right?
That's exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I want to talk about. Like if, you know, the next time, if I'm in the writer's room, I want to really explain to everyone what that's like as the author. And you know, one of the main reasons, and I'm so glad to talk about first time, you know, on your podcast, YouTube thing, is that I really want to like kind of demystify this, because when I was an author, I mean, I'm still an author, but this was my fantasy and no one would talk about it. And now all of a sudden I'd see someone have a TV show. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, what happened? And it seemed like this kind of thing. And I had no clue. And I would Google and be like, how could I get this done for myself? So my top tips for you guys, if you want to get it, unfortunately, I have now indie people. I love it. Yes, some indie books get it, like a BB Easton, of course, she got it. And then some indie books are also required by Passionflix. So yes, there are some pathways for indie books to be made. For me, that did not work for me. And I really had the sales to back it up and I couldn't get in that room. For me, this is why I went trad. So one of the things that I say, like, you know, you can keep writing in your series, you can keep being indie, you can keep doing it. But if you have this idea that you think can do it, consider going trad as kind of like a Hail Mary pass. No, I could have done this and not have this turned out this way, and then I wouldn't regret it at all. You know, there's zero guarantee on that at all. But to me, this is why I went trad. And of course, experience working with additional publishers has been amazing, and I've learned so much stuff. But this was like my pipe dream that I thought this is the only way. I believe this could be a movie. Now it's a TV show, but I want to do this. So.
That's amazing. What an amazing story. What an inspirational story. Hopefully there are lots of people watching this, because I know my personal dream is like, I'd love my romance series to be picked up as a Netflix show, or a Amazon Prime show or whatever show. So it's amazing to meet somebody who's seen that actually happen. And I think it's going to be very inspiring to a lot of people listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think it's everyone's dream. And the one thing I want to say is it can absolutely happen. Like it's all about timing. I'm not dissing my writing or anyone else's. It's kind of like that perfect kind of thing. And of you need to be looking at what sells option wise and what's on TV, and look at Publishers Weekly, because they announced the film options and the TV options. They announced mine, and see what they're doing. And you want to make, and again, not copying it all, but you want your stuff to be what's uniquely you, that nobody else has, you know, and then something is Hollywood, right? So they want this, that's why they keep remaking the same sequels over again. So they want something familiar, but fresh, right? And so you have to kind of find, so it's everything like, and think of the top stuff. So it's like, one of the book Cinder was like, you know, Cinderella, but Chinese and with cyborgs. Or like my friend, who wrote The Live Hypothesis, she just got a film deal, Ali Hazelwood. Her book was, you know, what if Kylo Ren, and it's a Kylo and Rey fan fiction, right? But she put it in she's a scientist, so she put it in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and she's a great friend of mine. So, you know, and mine is, okay, well, Crazy Rich Mexicans, right? So like, you know, set with like Romeo and Juliet, Taco Wars. So you're trying to get something to mash it up. Again, Hunger Games, like, you know, a war, but reality TV, right? So think like that.
Like the elevator pitch, right? You want it to.
The elevator pitch is a one-line pitch. The one-line pitch. Yeah, and that's I wrote my pitch before I wrote one word of the book. I can read it real quick if it helps anyone. So this was before I wrote one word. This is what I wrote. Alana Albertson's Ramona, who I like hadn't even written it. And this is actually what was published in Publishers Weekly that got me all the agents. All the info. Alana Albertson's Ramona and Julieta, an Own Voices contemporary romance. Pitch: Latin crazy rich Asians meets you on Day of the Dead, realize they are the children of bitter rivals when a wealthy businessman shows up to take over a Star Chef's award-winning seat-to-table taqueria. And so I wrote that, and then I wrote the 50 pages. So I write the pitch. I write the pitch for my book before I write a word, and I still do that to this day.
That's very good advice. I often, best advice I ever give that I never take myself is write the blurb before you write the book.
Right, because you have to, the conflict, and you have to know in that, and we know that with marketing, right? So if you have that, you can, everything else goes there. So blurb first.
Well, unfortunately, we have come up to the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap things up. Craig and I will have to discuss and invite you. I mean, obviously, you're going to come back and tell us more in the future. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yes, love you. Yes.
Now, to anybody watching this, where can they find out more about you as an author and your books and everything like that?
So yeah, they can go to my website or on Amazon. And then I teach classes for authors. I teach how to write a breakout book class, and a million of like Instagram news, a million other author classes. So yeah, and then I spend most of my time on Instagram. I'm trying to go to TikTok because it's better, but it's a struggle. So for now, I'll stay in Instagram.
Well, that's wonderful. Alana, thank you so much for joining us. And if anybody watching this or listening to this has appreciated what Alana has to say, make sure you drop a comment down below and give her a shout out. Craig, do you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it's been this episode has been a whirlwind, just like the whole just like the whole deal, right? So obviously we're really excited to hear more about it, and we, as soon as we can, we'll get you back on. And you know, all the authors want to hear this kind of story. This is, like we said, it's the dream. This is what everyone works towards, or a lot of people work towards. So hearing how you got it done is going to be inspirational, and it's going to give people, especially, you know, you gave some tips, so it's going to be great for other people to do the same thing. So thanks so much for being so open and sharing everything with us.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I love Hidden Gems. They were a key part of my success. Indie always had the arcs and everything. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Alana. We really, really appreciate you joining us. And yeah, make sure, as I said, leave a comment for Alana down below. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button. I think there's a bell that you can press to make sure you get notified of every new episode we have. And Craig and I will be back next week with a new guest for another episode of Fully Booked. So stay tuned until then. Bye-bye.